from Arlington to Washington, D.C. Very inspirational, by the way. And so we wanted to get the story behind that and what Catholics in those dioceses are asking. Good morning to you, Mr. Peters.
Good morning.
We were grateful for your time today. Let's start with the event itself. What was this event? How did it get started? Who planned it? And all of that.
Well, it was just organized by kind of ordinary parishioners in the diocese affected, in the Diocese of Washington, D.C. and Arlington. It was organized by me and just a few other people. And it really came about in response to these, just kind of spontaneously, almost in response to these restrictions that were announced in July 22nd by the Archdiocese of Washington, D.C., and on July 29th by the Diocese of Arlington.
So this was the enforcement of Traditionis Custodes, which seemed very heavy-handed there in the Diocese of Arlington and Washington, D.C. Can you give us a sense of what's the difference here? What was it like before and now after with access to the 62 Missal Mass?
Yeah. Well, before it was very free. We had 28 different locations within the two dioceses in Arlington and Washington, D.C. that were offering the traditional Latin Mass. That's down to 11, so cut by over half the draft availability, especially in the Archdiocese of Washington, D.C. There's no more weekday TLMs anywhere in the Archdiocese of Washington, D.C., which doesn't just include the city of Washington, D.C. That includes the surrounding counties in Maryland, too. Pretty much only Sundays at 9 a.m. In three locations. Nothing on Christmas, nothing on Holy Week. All of that is gone entirely in Washington, D.C. Wow. And then in the Diocese of Arlington, we were moved out of parish churches. We had 21 locations. We were moved out of all but 3 of those locations into different school gyms. In a lot of cases, chapels. These spaces, through the efforts of parishioners, have been transformed almost overnight into beautiful spaces. But these were gyms in many cases and social halls, and people have tried very hard to make them look successfully to make them look nice. They've actually been kind of miraculously transformed and are very nice now. But but they've been kicked out of all but 3 parish church locations.
Mr. Peters, can you give us a sense of how big these communities were? I mean, for the Archdiocese to close a large community, that's going to displace a lot of people. Do you have any numbers?
So there's probably about, it really varies. It's definitely thousands of people who were affected by it. I would say probably at least 5,000 between the two locations, between Archdiocese of Washington, D.C. and the Diocese of Arlington. Provisions are being made to try to make space for all of the folks who attend the TLM. It's very tough and it's very tight in a lot of the locations, the new locations that we've been given. In Southern Maryland, they, especially in Benedict, Maryland, St. Francis de Sales there, there's really, it's really overcrowded in the space that parish was moved to. It was moved to a mission church, which doesn't have enough space for everyone. There's similar situations in the Diocese of Arlington where the spaces are just too small to fit everyone, and there's been overflow at a lot of masses. So it's definitely affecting a lot of people out here, and that's why the response to it has just been kind of tremendous in terms of people wanting to go out and wanting to do something about it, and writing their bishops and writing Cardinal Gregory and Bishop Burbidge and trying to get these terrible restrictions overturned.
Now, as far as the march went, you marched from the cathedral in Arlington to the cathedral in D.C. How many participants were there for the march?
We had about 300 people for the march. So it was a really, really good turnout. We had no idea how many people were going to turn out when we were planning it. It all came together very quickly. As I said, like the restrictions were announced on July 29th, and we basically planned it in the space of a month and a half. So yes, we had about 300 people.
How far is that?
So the march itself was about 5 miles, and it was about a 2-hour walk.
Okay, that's not bad. And did you have like police escort? I mean, what was the route? Was it like along the streets?
Yeah, it was sidewalks, basically, mostly. It was. We didn't have police escort. The police were aware of it and were very helpful. But because it was occurring on public sidewalks, and then the sidewalks were very wide there, it worked out pretty well in terms of that. I mean, it was just a beautiful experience. We had singing, praying the rosary. We walking over the Key Bridge into Washington, D.C. was just a kind of wonderful experience. There's lots of great videos and photos of it. It was really a beautiful, special, spiritual occasion.
I imagine families, moms, dads, and kids.
Yes, a lot of families and stuff like that. So it was a great turnout in that regard. We had a lot of families and a lot of people pushing strollers.
Did you have any clergy with you?
We had a couple of clergy members who came. We had Father Lavelle from the Coalition for Canceled Priests was there, and we had at least one other fellow who came, I think a seminarian.
Now, we have about a minute and a half here before we have to go to a break, but we're going to continue our conversation after the break. But did you have any opportunity, I imagine, with, like you said a minute ago, with so many faithful that are affected by this in that area, writing to the bishops, had the bishops been open to conversating, to dialogue, to listening sessions, or anything like that?
Well, in terms of meaningful listening sessions, it hasn't, not really. Basically, Cardinal Gregory held a listening session in May in Washington, D.C., but it didn't really have and a lot of people came and pleaded with him to try to not do this, to not do these restrictions, and it didn't have any effect. We know that the restrictions that he planned were almost essentially the same before and after the listening session. In terms of what happened in Arlington, we definitely had, we wrote to the bishop en masse with the public letters that were signed by thousands of people.
Hold that thought right there. We're at a break. It has been a very difficult thing for so many to lose access to the sacred liturgy in the 62 Missal. And it's been a tough balance trying to not be discouraged by that, trying not to dissent. Some people have left. I mean, it's been a very grave and difficult situation for literally thousands and thousands of Catholics around the world. And it's been refreshing to see Noah Peters and so many Catholics in the Arlington and Washington, D.C. area to do something that they hoped would move the hearts of their bishops. And we're talking with Noah Peters now about that. Welcome back to the show, sir. You left off with a letter writing campaign to the bishop in Arlington. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so this is basically how, my initial kind of action in this regard was to, in January, when when the Bishop Burbidge said that he was considering implementing Traditionis Custodes, to organize a letter writing campaign that attracted the signature of 25,000 Catholics from the Arlington Diocese in support of the traditional Latin Mass. The restrictions that ended up coming down were a lot harsher in Arlington than anyone could have anticipated at the time. We had no idea that we would be thrown out of all but 3 parish churches, and had the number of locations cut by over half. It was unimaginably harsh in that regard. So I don't think that it didn't reflect in a lot of ways the kind of quote unquote listening church aspect. I mean, basically everyone in the diocese, there was no movement that I could see in favor of kicking out Latin Mass parishioners. In fact, a lot of the we've gotten a lot of great support. A lot of people at the march didn't even attend the Latin Mass and were just sympathetic to us.
Oh wow!
So we've gotten a lot of great support from people who don't even attend the Latin Mass. But in all of these parishes, they obviously offer the Novus Ordo. And we're friends. We have close bonds with everyone who goes there. I mean, we're in the parish communities. So the idea of throwing us out of the church and throwing us to different locations really gave people kind of a very bad feeling. So yeah, I mean, it was something where I think the listening probably didn't really seem to happen very much, unfortunately. But we're going to continue to try. We are continuing to work with the bishops and continuing to write to them and to try to work with them within these restrictions.
It is hard, is it not, to maintain that good attitude, that joyful spirit in the midst of what feels like a super heavy-handed approach. I mean, of all the problems in the world today, who knew that the traditional Latin Mass is the biggest culprit?
Yeah, that's what always has floored me in all of this, is looking out in all the problems in the church. I mean, let alone the world, but in the Catholic Church, with infant baptisms declining, with marriages within the church declining, mass attendance plummeting. To think that the problem is the fact that too many people are attending the Latin Mass, I mean, it's crazy. And you have to think about it's just so mind-boggling in a lot of ways. But I think in terms of doing the march, a lot of it was to just raise our spirits because it's very tough. I mean, when you see people treated so unfairly, when you see so many beautiful masses canceled, it really does. It is a spur to action, and it has to be positive action. And so that's what I think really motivated me to want to organize this march, was just waking up every day and just feeling this kind of oh no feeling. It was almost just to raise, and I know a lot of other people were feeling that way too. And I've had so many people come up to me and say thank you, because I didn't know that we could do something like this, and it just made us all, I think, feel ultimately at the end of the day, feel a lot closer to the church, and feel a lot better just about the situation, to be able to do something so beautiful in response.
What kind of repercussions have you had so far, or what kind of repercussions are you expecting to have, both positive and negative?
Well, it's really been very, very positive. I have, I think that there's a lot of what it's done is it's raised awareness a lot of what's going on. I think it's created a determination to try even harder to make it work within these restrictions. We're trying to get a 501c3 together to try to raise money to help maintain and improve the spaces that we've been given, and help kind of make the spaces even better. I mean, there is, like I said before, there's restrictions in terms of how big the spaces are, and there's been overflow problems that have arisen, and we anticipate these restrictions are going to be in effect for at least 2 more years. And with the growth that we've seen, honestly, in the last year, the overflow problems may well become even worse. So it's really all been positive. There hasn't really been any, and the, graces we've gotten from this march have just been amazing. And that's why we encourage everyone around the country, whether or not you're affected by Traditionis or not, whether or not you even attend the Latin Mass, if you are a traditionally minded Catholic, now is the time to get together and pray the Rosary every week. Do a Marian pilgrimage or a Marian procession. Organize something like this in your own community, because this is a very powerful thing to do.
You know, I always go back to when I think about this, the fallout of Traditionis Custodes. As my family and I do attend the traditional Latin Mass at an FSSP parish, we're very blessed. We have grown to love the tradition in a way that we didn't expect. I didn't expect. I've shared that many times. But we can take it for granted. We're very blessed to have access to it and to not have to be in a situation like you, where you are forced to do something that you are struggling with here. In other words, attend the Novus Ordo Mass when you would prefer to attend the traditional Latin Mass and not have access to the daily Mass or the feast day Masses, et cetera, et cetera. How hard has it been? How many in your group are tempted to dissent? Attempted to a heavy-handedness in the approach to the bishops? How hard is it to maintain that level of charity even towards the bishops who have restricted you?
Well, it's been, it certainly has been something that I know a lot of people have struggled with, but I would say that what I've seen, the response has been extremely, extremely positive. In terms of wanting to continue praying for the bishops and not just stay within the church, but grow even closer to the church. And seeing the church as wounded and needing us and needing faithful Catholics more than ever to rush to its assistance. So, I mean, there's definitely been, as you might predict, there's definitely been some urges to want to criticize the bishops or do something like that. But the response that we've ultimately come to, I think, has been overwhelmingly positive. No one wants to play into the stereotypes that are the false narratives that are being pushed, that people who attend the TLM are somehow schismatic or against the church. Nobody's playing into that narrative. We're all trying much harder. We're rallying to our priests, we're rallying to our bishops, and trying to grow even more involved and closer to the church. But it's a struggle, but as Catholics, we're used to that, and we're used to overcoming struggles successfully.
Let me ask you a question then. If you, let's just assume for the sake of the conversation that the bishop in Arlington and the Archbishop in Washington, D.C. are listening to this program right now. What would you say to them?
Well, I'd say we continue to pray for you. We are thankful for you for working with us thus far, and we want to continue to work with you and support you to see ways that we can continue to serve the needs of traditional Catholics and to continue to allow people to have even greater access to the 1962 Missal, and for you to see that this is a positive movement within the church, one whose growth is inevitable as people are attracted to, the treasures of our Catholic tradition. They're attracted to the Old Mass, and to see how we can work to bring more people into the church, to allow more people to have access to the 1962 Missal within the parameters that we've been given.
Do you plan for any new marches, any new events?
Yes, we're definitely going to make this an annual, at least an annual event, the pilgrimage. We're also continuing to have weekly rosary rallies in front of the Papal Nunciature.
Oh, good.
These are in the Papal Embassy in Washington, D.C., which is kind of the official area of the Vatican within D.C., and just to bear witness to the fruit of the 1962 Missal, of the traditional Latin Mass, to express our sorrow over the restrictions. This is something that's been going on in France as well after Traditionis was handed down, and it's a very powerful witness to the power of the traditional Latin Mass. And we are thinking about perhaps doing a semi-annual pilgrimage in March. We're starting to discuss that as well, making this a twice-a-year thing. But we're definitely going to continue to have our weekly rosary rallies every Saturday at 10 a.m. If you're in Washington, D.C., or even if you're not, if you're just visiting. We have lots of people who are visiting D.C. who come to the rosary rallies. Those are 10 a.m. every Saturday. And we're going to continue to do the pilgrimage every year and hopefully twice a year.
Do you have a website or Facebook post or anything like that? How do people find information? How do they contact you? How do they rally behind your banner?
Yeah, so our website is tlmpilgrimage.com. Our Facebook is DC Rosary Rally on Facebook. We also have a Twitter, DC Rosary Rally. We also have TLM Pilgrimage on Facebook, and we have TLM Pilgrimage on Twitter as well. Those are all great places to stay in touch. And we've also launched a website for something called the Arlington Latin Mass Society, which has information on Mass times within the Arlington Diocese and the locations that are offering it. So we just launched that website the other day for the Arlington Latin Mass Society. If you search for that on Google, you should be able to find it. So we have lots of different ways for you to follow. And on the Arlington Latin Mass Society, you can subscribe for updates about what we're doing.
All right. Well, we are praying for your success and moving the hearts of the bishops there. We'd love to see a restoration of the access to the traditional Latin Mass for those Catholics that are desiring that. Noah Peters, God bless you, brother. Thank you for your time today. Thanks for sharing this with us.
Thank you. God bless you.
All right. That's going to do it for hour number one. If you can join us in the second hour, our good friend, attorney Brent Haynes, is back on the show to catch us up on a couple of national stories. All that plus the game show and a lot more. Go to grnonline.com/CDT.